Hi, this is Danielle Fuller, and this is a little bonus episode for the Scientific Enneagram podcast. I launched the podcast back in January and put out one episode and then disappeared. So I wanted to explain the why behind the disappearance and kind of honor that justification. With me on today's episode, I asked everyone's favorite Melissa Kircher of Enneagram Paths to join me. So thank you for coming and chatting with me, Melissa.
It is my pleasure and honor to be here.
So I stepped away because the day that my podcast launched, my dad went on hospice. So, I wasn't expecting to cry during this or this quickly. Yeah, literally the day that it launched, he went on hospice and passed away. For fuck's sake. Whew. I've only cried once since he died.
So obviously needed right now. Yeah.
Huh. Okay. So my dad went on hospice the day my podcast launched and then passed away on the 21st of January. So I was probably obviously not in a place to be working on a podcast or to be recording episodes about science or the Enneagram. So I wanted to spend this little bonus episode to talk about my dad. He was a pretty large influence as to how I see the world, why this podcast even exists in the first place. So I invited Melissa as a type 5, as my dad was also a type 5, and her experience with losing family members and going through grief to just talk about all of that. Talk about my dad, give him some kudos for the man he was, as well as talk about the grief process and how different it is for different people. For example, I thought I was doing good and I hadn't cried in a long time. And all we had to do is click record and all of a sudden it's pouring out. So grief's weird. And I appreciate Melissa being here to talk about it with me. So yeah.
So Danielle, uh, I think you mentioned that your dad was a type 5. So that was a little bit of the reason, the connection with me
Yeah.
of a type 5 and being what we are.
Yes.
And just briefly, that I also lost my dad this year. So we had just connected about that. So you just said that, you know, grief showed up as it tends to do in its own time, in its own way, and it's
Yeah.
wildly unpredictable. It is nonlinear and like a little ball of weird yarn. How are you doing in this moment?
I'm glad you prefaced in this moment because a lot of people will say, well, how are you? How are you doing? And that's such a vague question to ask somebody going through grief because it's a ball of yarn and things come and go. And one day you're fine, 1 minute you're fine. Like we talked before hitting record, and I was like, I did not see this coming at all. So right now it's hard to tell. This is very stereotypical type 9. I'm not actually sure how I'm feeling. I know the reaction is there, and I'm sure it has to do with sadness, but I don't necessarily actively feel sad about it. This is usually when I will take time to step back and reflect on why didn't I cry? Why do I think that happened? And my therapist tells me not to intellectualize my emotions and to just feel them, but it's very hard to do. So I would say in general, I'm doing well. My dad had pancreatic cancer, and we've known that he was going to die from it for about 3 years now. So it was a very prolonged grief. I feel like I did a lot of my grieving upfront. And so when he actually died, there was obviously the immediate sadness, but then it went into, okay, well, we have to plan a celebration of life. We're trying to sort through his very complicated trust, which I'd love to talk to you about as a fellow 5. Um, there was a lot to do. And so I was wondering how, when March came, his celebration of life was the last day of February. So I was like, am I going to be a complete wreck by the time that um, March comes around because I've been avoidant? But it actually felt the opposite. It felt just like this huge weight off of my shoulders. Like, okay, we can finally move on to the next chapter because 3 years is a long time to be on the edge of your seat of, is this his last birthday? Is this his last Christmas? Are we
Hmm.
How much time are we going to have together? Should I go on this trip or should I be here? Is he going to go in the hospital again anytime soon? Is today a good day for him or a bad day for him? So having all of that gone was actually a huge relief. And I had one day since then that I woke up sad about it and cried a little bit, but then I was fine by lunch. And so this is really the second time since his celebration of life. So the second time in almost a month that I've cried about it. So right now I am less good. This morning I was fine. So it comes and goes.
Yeah, that's I was actually talking to my husband about it last night, grief. And um I'm coming up on some anniversaries very soon, and I was telling him because he asked me how I was doing like that in that moment, and I said, "I actually in this moment I'm fine, but today I had emotions, but I didn't know what they were, and I couldn't put names to them. And so I didn't know how to move them through my body. And then I couldn't describe them with words because they had no names. So I didn't have words and I didn't know what they were. And they just had to be there, but I didn't know what
Yep.
they were. And
Yeah.
I didn't know if crying or angry or it was just they were there. And I was like, it's just the weirdest thing to experience that and feel something but not be able to express it. Sometimes it comes out as traditional grief, right? And sometimes it's just weird. I think the most strange thing about loss and death is that grief is alive. And it's just like, how fucked up is that? Like
It's a
it
little
is an
bit.
alive energy that has its own movement and beingness,
Mhm.
and it is unpredictable, and it is so when you say in this moment and when that came up, I really understand that
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
A friend of mine got me a little care package, and one of the things in there, she's like, I hope this is okay." But it was a book called Fuck Death, and
Mm.
it's about the grieving process, but it's just really honest and in your face and saying, it uses a lot of profanity, obviously, with the F word in the title, but I actually found it very reassuring because it shows how messy it is. It acknowledges the fact that, other people don't know how to respond to you and they're going to say and do dumb things because they don't know. And you're going to get annoyed, and how the anger can be directed at, the person who died, or it can be directed at your immediate people, or it could be directed at the person who was just trying to be nice and saying, "Oh, I know they're in a better place," and you just want to lash at them and strangle them and be like, "That's not the point here." One analogy they said is it's like if somebody like cuts off your arm and then is like, "I'm sure God needed that arm." It's like, "Fuck you! I needed that arm. That was my arm. Can we acknowledge the fact that I just lost my arm? I don't care if you think somebody else needed it. I needed it, and can I just be sad about that for a second?" So
Yeah.
I felt the anger chapter, being in the anger triad, felt that pretty deeply, and felt mine that I'm not mad at my dad. I know he didn't do anything wrong. I'm not mad at the universe for taking him. I know that intellectually, I know this kind of stuff happens. So I think my a lot of my emotions are probably anger coming out in subtle passive aggressive ways.
Yeah, how is that as a type 9 to not be able to deal with anger the same way that you're I would assume normally used to coping with it, repressing
Um,
it, not feeling it, or feeling it?
um, I felt I don't know if maybe I was looking for an excuse or something to let it out, but it if I'm being honest in the moment, if I'm feeling it, I'm more honest about it now because I know I have the backup of being like, well, she's in mourning. So if she's angry right now, if she says something, she might not mean it. It's whatever. It's almost like I have that back cover where every day, if my partner is annoying me with something he does, I feel bad expressing my anger about it because I'm like, well, but he has his reasons and he has his justification, and I don't want him to feel bad about it or ruminate on it or anything. So I can just deal with this internally. Um, with the grief being there, I can be like, "You know what? You're really pissing me off right now." I told him that the other day. I was like, "I love you so much." And every morning that I come down and there are granola crumbs on the same spot on the counter where you ate it, I hate you a little bit. And those are just things that I wasn't saying before. So, I don't know if I'm leaning in a bit to my 8 wing and letting that take charge and take control of a situation that feels uncontrollable otherwise. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think it's a really healthy coping skill to be able to allow anger out and give yourself the here's the reason why it's acceptable and be curious if that continues. I mean, grief doesn't leave, right? It
Right.
just alchemizes and changes and is with you always. Uh, it would be interesting to put a little pin in that and see if the anger stays because the movement from for nines for anger is actually like moving into anger is so healthy and teaches you a lot because it's about injustice, right? So
Mhm.
there is an unjustness to the loss of somebody, and there's also unjustness to crumbs on the countertop. Right? Like it's a I took a picture of a blob on my bathroom sink yesterday and sent it to my husband and I was like, "What is this blob? This blob has been showing up. Is this a booger? Is this what is it?" It's hair gel, so we're not actually gross. And I was like, "The blobs keep showing up and I'm about done."
Yeah.
So it's unjust. I should not be cleaning up this blob. This is your side of the sink,
Yeah.
you know? So there's just in small ways unjust and in universal ways unjust. And um, I'm not going to say I'm glad that you're in touch with your anger because then that's like patronizing, that's those
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, it's happened for a reason. Like, no, you
Right.
didn't. It
Look at
sucks.
your growth. What silver
Look at your
lining?
growth. Yeah, no, that's not the way you
Um,
want to grow. However, and like having a byproduct,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
is something. It is something.
It is. It is
Yeah.
something that I can at least say, well, that part doesn't suck as much, or at least it's nice to
Yeah.
have a like a almost a pressure valve and an enhanced capability to release that.
To
And
release it.
honestly,
Yeah.
a lot of credit to my partner because he's such a fantastic person when it comes to he's hard to rattle, which is great for somebody who struggles to be open and honest with how they're feeling when it's controversial or when it's negative. Um, he gives me such a great space to say those things without snapping back, without, well, but you didn't, whatever. He goes into listening mode and says, thank you for telling me that. I didn't realize that. I'm going to try that to be better about that in the future. It really reduces the level of conflict I feel from sharing that anger that I mean, otherwise, I don't know, I was otherwise accustomed to, I guess. I think it's natural for people to be defensive when somebody come at them, and the fact that he's not and gives me that space has helped me practice over the past few years. So for better or for worse, he's the one who gets to hear the most of it.
Okay, that I now I have 2 questions. 1, what type is he? And 2, as you were talking, then I my 5 little curious brain, what has helped you in terms of grief support, and what do you feel like 9s really need grief support-wise?
He is a 7 with a very strong 8 wing. A lot of people meet him and they're like, "Are you sure he's not an 8?" And I'm like, I'm sure because I know like his motivation is very, very 7. But he's hard to rattle, he's pretty confident, but not overly confident. We both have that positivity triad overlap where we want things to feel good and cool, and he knows that allowing me to share that with him without snapping back at me keeps things cool, and that he knows that it's reciprocated too, and if he has something, I'm not going to suddenly bristle and get defensive, and I'll listen to him. Which honestly has been a learning experience for me because my family has always been fairly reactive, I guess. Not in an outward way, but we es we tend to take things personally if somebody brings something negative up,
Mhm.
and we'll ruminate and we'll stir and be like, "Well, but what led to that?" And it's a curious mind, I think. There's always nuance to every scenario, so, what could I have done differently, but what could they have done differently? How could we have tackled this together? And that can come across as defensive in the moment. So I'm still learning how to come out of that and just be in listening mode and not problem solving or justifying or whatever mode with him. So, seven
Mhm.
wing eight is the answer to the first part of the question. And the second part was what did nines need?
Yeah, like,
You
in
think?
terms of grief, what do you feel that has been, like, the most helpful for you and that maybe other nines listening or people that have nines in their life could learn from so far about how to best support a nine during a loss of any kind?
Um, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for the nine to withdraw. It's a very natural reaction. And I honestly think it's going to be pretty dependent on their level of health and their instincts and whatnot in order to say what's best for them. Personally, I needed to withdraw a little bit. I withdrew from this podcast. I withdrew from work. I withdrew from being as responsive as I usually am to friend groups and text threads and everything. And I needed
Mhm,
that for a little bit. I needed to not be like, "Come on, just get out of it. Come on, let's go. Let's go do things. Let's keep your mind off of it." I didn't want that. I wanted to just sit and be sad. I feel like that's an appropriate response when your parent dies. Um, I wanted to just sit at home and do puzzles and read and watch my comfort shows. But I also know that's not like long-term sustainable. So for me personally, it was nice to have people continuing to check up. I think that when people that we love go through a loss, there's that immediate reach out of, the day that you hear about the hospice or the journey of how's he doing? Is he still here, et cetera? And then right after he dies. And there's less checkup as time goes on. And I think
mhm.
that for nine specifically, without having continued checkups, I think there's more of a likelihood that they settle into that withdrawal longer term. So I was fortunate. We did the celebration of life over a month after he died, which helped because then I got to, settle a little bit, but then I had to spike up and ramp up to plan the celebration of life and then see all the people and talk to all the people and get checked up on again and then them saying, "Well, I'm sorry this happened. This was a great celebration of life. Let's get coffee next week or something." So
Mhm.
yeah, multiple checkups I think would be good. Just staying in tune with them. They probably won't reach out for help. I think I won't say it's right for everybody, but I might argue it's right for everybody. Is that when you're supporting somebody going through grief is to not say, "Tell me what I can do. If there's anything I can do, reach out." Because somebody going through grief doesn't know. Like I never had a dad die. I didn't know what I needed. So my partner and I, Clayton, were in therapy talking about this, about how I felt like he hadn't been there the way that I had hoped he would be there for me. And his response was, like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. You honestly seemed like you were doing okay. So since you were doing okay, I was kind of taking your lead and thought that you were fine." I was like, my dad still died. My dad died like a couple weeks ago. That's if
Yeah.
I seem okay or not, that fact still stands and that fact will still be the fact next week, next month, next year. So I'm not
Mhm.
asking for special treatment for an infinite amount of time, but really just being there and keeping the pulse of that person. And even if they say they're fine, continue showing up for them in little ways. Don't ask what they need because they don't know. Um, he asked me, "Well, can we brainstorm ideas of what I can do to help or what I need?" I'm like, no, we can't because I
Mhm.
don't know. I just need you to know that you're there, whether it's just like a little note or whether dinner's made when I get home or just a extra long hug or something. Give me options and then I will give you feedback. Or instead of saying, "Tell me what I can do to help," send a list and say, "Hey, I'm going to do one of these things for you. You choose." Or say, "Hey, I'm going to the store and I'm going to bring new groceries. Let me know if you have any preferences. Otherwise, I'll surprise you." Choosing the action, especially for a nine, is just incredibly helpful and thoughtful in a moment when everything else just seems so up in the air.
I love that. I think that's a really specific thing for nines. Like when you said give a list, because I don't know. I think the universal is I don't know, right? In
Mhm.
the moment of the person who is grieving. Um, but the specifics of what is needed, because as a 5, that would overwhelm me. And when I was going through it, I needed people to check in on me, but I also needed to come to them when I was ready. So I needed them to give me the blank slate that when it hit, I had a network of people that I knew if something hit in one way, this is the person I could call. If something hit in a different way, this is the person I could ask. And so I was able to reach out to my network when I needed it so that it didn't
Mm,
feel overwhelming on me. If somebody had presented me with a list, I would have been like, "No, thank you, I'm good." And that would not have helped me at all. Like, so I think it's really important to talk about these nuances,
mhm,
and communication, I think, is the best thing, even if you don't know at the time, even if you need a third party to help you, a therapist, talk it through with your partner or with your loved ones. Talking about it, moving through it, and being in the "I don't know," but then, 5 minutes later, you might know, you know?
mhm,
Or even in the therapy session, it could be, "I don't know that I need a list," but later that afternoon, you're like, "Oh, actually, I need a list. I need you to come with m I need you to reach out to me." I think what you said about continually checking in past the initial thing is probably a pretty universal thing for everyone. Check on your people, like, once a month. If you're not in their close circle, or even if you are and you know that you're trying to feel things out, it is not hard to just write it on your calendar. Like,
mhm,
check in with Danielle, check in with Melissa once a month and see how they're doing. I had a friend ask me to do that for them about something different. And I was like
mhm.
immediately writing it on the calendar. So like every 3 months I'm checking in about this thing with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great thing that we can do for each other, because it is the socially normal thing to ask right then,
Mhm.
and then it feels awkward. People don't know what to say, people don't know what
Yeah.
to do, they don't wanna say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing, they don't wanna make you mad, but sometimes you need to have somebody say the wrong thing and make you mad just because you need to know that they care and it's okay, and then you can like, "Oh, that was annoying. Could you just say it this way instead?" Like, "Yeah, I can," like, we're all human just muddling through, and
Mhm.
so I think that's really good advice to check in on your people.
Yep. Yep, which is gonna be, easier for some than others and more natural, like, I have a
Sure.
social instinct, so that's I want to keep the community strong and the belonging strong and make sure everybody's taken care of. My partner, that's his lowest, so for
Mhm.
him, it's just not it doesn't come to his mind naturally, so as you said, put it on the calendar if it's your relationships matter to you, which it doesn't matter whether you're self-pres or social, your relationships
Yeah.
do matter to you. Put on the calendar or texting. Usually now you can even pre-program it and be like, I want to send this text on this day at this time. Just do a whole bunch of those when you're thinking about it and then have them go out once a month or something.
Would you like to talk about your dad? Would you like to share about him and who he was? And if you're not ready at this point, that's also fine.
Yeah. I do. I really do. And I'm like, as soon as you asked that at first, it was like, yeah. And then like the emotion, I could feel the
Yeah.
eyes getting wet again.
That is okay. As a coach, I can tell you that that is all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was great. And he was an engineer. Um, STEM was so important to him. And so like that's the scientific part of this podcast and my Instagram really come from him because he was the science minded guy. Uh, and then when from like an Enneagram perspective, it the scientific backing for it isn't quite there. It's not absent completely, but there's just not a lot that's been done. And so when I started getting really into it, I wondered with him being a 5 and him being science minded, was he going to just like write this off as, some,
Oh, yeah.
nonsense?
We
And
we do that. We do a little bit do that.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it was actually on the contrary. He latched onto it faster than the rest of my family. He got like he would send me stuff now and then but he would always send it and be like, "I agree with 92% of this." Like it was
Yeah.
Obviously. He worked on a book, like an autobiography for in the years leading up to his passing, and in it, in the forward part of it, he talks about, here's who I am and whatnot. And he was an INTJ on Myers Briggs. So he talks about that and what that means to him. And then he has a whole section on the Enneagram. And he's like, I'm an Enneagram type 5. If you want excessive detail, you could ask my daughter, Danielle. But I would say I agree with 95% of what Enneagram 5 is. And then he kind of describes it. So I took that as for somebody with such a scientific mind and who needs facts and evidence and whatnot, despite the Enneagram lacking that, he still saw the value behind it, the helpfulness that it had between us and between him and my mom, who's a 7. They just come at the world so differently in a lot of ways, but being able to show that overlap and where they can really thrive and helping them see why they thrived for over 40 years of being married. Um, he saw the value in that despite there not being evidence. So it meant a lot to me. He wasn't doing it just to pacify me. So the fact that he could even get behind something like the Enneagram bolstered my love of it, I would say.
How did he live out his fiveness in a way that you could see and connect to more than the science, the engineering? Is
Yeah.
there anything you'd like to share about who he was and how that connected to fiveness?
Yeah. He oh gosh, it's so hard to talk about somebody you knew for almost 40 years. He was the brain. He always came up with the most complex situations. He was a self-bred social, so definitely
Okay.
kept to himself. He needed his alone time. He took work seriously. My mom was definitely like the parent raising us for the most part, but that he was not absent. He was very involved, but he would come home from work at 6:30 or 7 sometimes, have dinner with us, and then go down and work some more on his computer. But when we were growing up, he was the one with the systems thinking, and he set up very complex structures and rules and systems for us in like every aspect of life. Um, when we were younger, we paid
Hmm.
family taxes, which was his brainchild.
I love that. That's amazing.
we
Tell
would
tell me more. Tell me more about family taxes.
family taxes. We would get allowance, but only if we did our
Uh-huh.
chores. But also, chores were not optional. Chores were allocated based on age. We would get up out of bed in the morning on Saturday. There would be a list on the counter saying scrubbing the toilets is worth 2 points, mowing the yard is worth 5 points, vacuuming the main floor is worth 3 points, etc. And we had to do enough chores to get enough points to match our age. It was a meritocracy in that house, like, work for what you get. And so if I was 10 years old, I would have to do 10 points worth of chores, and then I would get my money. I would get $10 if I was 10, and I would get to keep 50% of that for spending, and then 25% would go to savings, and 25% would go to family taxes. So I would get to keep
Love it.
$5.
The lodge, every little detail just makes my brain happy. I have
uh,
2 assertive children, and that would literally never work, but if I could, impose will upon assertive children, I would love that. Like, that sounds so smart and so logical.
yeah, we learned the value of money very young, and
Yeah, and
learned,
budgeting, like,
yeah,
where it
budgeting.
goes.
The first time I had an actual job, I wasn't surprised when my paycheck was basically half of what I expected it to
Uh-huh.
be or what you would
Yep.
expect. But then also, it wasn't just like family taxes is, oh, dad gets the money back. It went into a jar. And then whenever we would complain that our microwave was too old because they got it before they were married in the 80s and it wasn't working like we wanted it to. And our friends have these nicer microwaves. And they're like, all right, family meeting. There were 4 of us. So if 3 out of 4 people agree and we have enough money in family taxes, we can use the family taxes to pay for a new microwave. And so we would have a meeting and work together and coming up with a solution. So the taxes were used on things like a microwave. We used some of it to buy a trampoline, which took a lot of convincing from my sister and me, but we had to like put our proposal together and explain how we were going to front half the cost and then taxes would be used to cover the other part. And here's how we would maintain safety and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, systems like that, making things which much more complex than needed. They were supposed to go on a road trip around Scotland. I was living in Scotland at the time, and they were going to come visit. And the trip didn't end up getting to happen because it was right when he found out he had cancer and ended up in the hospital for a week. But he has a oh gosh, I want to say it was like a 50 slide PowerPoint with a day by day breakdown of the entire trip of where we would be driving, where we would be staying, what would we be seeing, the approximate time that it would take to get from point A to point B, any reservations that were made with all of the details, pictures of the outsides of buildings that he got from Google Street View so that we would know where we were trying to go. He had this entire detailed plan and sent it over and was like, "Hey, here's the details for our trip." And I'm like, "I'm personally kind of like more of a wing it person, but your trip, I'll go along for
Mhm.
the ride."
Yeah. I apologize, and also, I mean, I'm not wired that way, I'm more of a wing it person as a
Yeah.
5, but that is a definite 5 trait for
Mhm.
some 5s,
Yeah.
and so what I hear is that your interactions with him were you gained a lot from how he was kinda wired
Mhm.
naturally, and also
Mhm.
there was lots of differences between how he was wired naturally and how you are wired naturally.
Yeah. Um, I think you bring up a great point that I want to mention about how that's not all fives, and he was on the autism spectrum as well. And I know that a lot of times people will conflate autism with type fiveness, but
Mhm,
he happened to be both. But I have a feeling that a lot of like that planning that he did for his Scotland trip probably came from more of a place of his being on the spectrum, needing to
mhm,
have all of that certainty documented and thought
mhm.
through ahead of time than it did this type fiveness.
That makes
So
sense.
one of the things that I would love to see studied in the Enneagram space is parents' influence on their children's type. Um, it's a combination of nature and nurture, sure, but if I was hardwired to be a 9, I still feel like I got a lot of my personality, a lot of my reactions, a lot of how I approach the world, see the world from my dad.
Mhm,
So was I destined to be a 9? Or is my 9-ness some of me, but also a reactive combo of how my dad sees the world, maybe his being a little bit more withdrawn, but also my mom being a 7 and her positivity and her social nature. Uh, it would be really interesting it would be hard. You'd have to have a lot of data over a long period of
I would say a
time of
large,
oh
yeah.
yeah, of knowing for sure what the parents types were, knowing for sure what the offspring's types were. um
Yeah, that would be hard.
it would be a lot of
But
data
w
to gather, but really really cool.
it would be cool, and it would be cool if there was more research, I think, about neurodivergence, or I like to call it neurospiciness,
Yes.
and the Enneagram because I think it people ask a lot of questions and they identify on any part of the I'm a highly sensitive person, so I identify as
Mhm.
neurospicy, for
Yeah.
sure, and it really does impact when you're talking about Enneagram and type and things like that. There are
Mhm.
so many intertwined things and then so many very apart things, and it just has
Yeah.
not been studied enough to where we can say really anything definitively about it. So, yeah, I agree about both things. I would love to see research. So get on that, okay?
Okay, yeah, don't
Okay.
I'll get back to you next week.
Sure. Great with results and data.
Maybe someday, maybe
Fantastic.
someday.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about him and his engineering brain, and you're in the field of science, and do
Mhm.
you feel I mean, you've talked about it that you have felt like that he was an influence on that. Do you feel like you went into your, career path because of him? Was it a mix was it basically what you're saying? Was it a
100%.
mixture of nature, nurture? Okay.
I would say it was First of all, I this is completely off topic, but I could soapbox about how dumb I think it is to ask 17-year-olds what they want to be when they grow up, because some 17-year-olds know and they stick with it.
Mhm.
I'm not one of those people. Hardly anybody I know is one of those people. My mom changed careers when she was in her 40s. Um, so anyway, all that to preface with, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college, but you have to choose when you're a junior.
Yeah.
And my dad was an engineer. He was an electrical engineer. I knew that about him. I looked up to him. And we had a 1 week thing in our physics class where we messed around with circuit boards. So I thought that was cool. So I chose to do electrical engineering and then settled on that. Then got really into my Spanish class. And I was like, you know what? Maybe instead I'll change my major to being like Spanish and international studies, because I just really like that. And I don't really know what engineering is other than my dad does it, but I'll do that. I'll do that. And I told him, and it will always stick with me. He asked, "So what kind of jobs would you get with that double major?" I was like, I don't know, something in international studies and speaking Spanish maybe." And he said, "You can be an engineer who speaks Spanish. You cannot be a Spanish major who does engineering." It's like, fuck. His logic is there, and I can't argue with it. His whole thing, he was such a preparer. He created his financial plan for retirement when he was 19 and followed it until
Wow.
his death, and was very proud to be like ahead of schedule. So long-term thinking was just so him. It
Mhm.
was deeply ingrained within him, and making near-term investments, monetarily or otherwise, for the long-term payout was kind of his MO.
So
His
self-pres.
yeah,
Yeah.
his mindset there was, you're going to have to get some degree if you go to college. So choose something that will have a good payout and you can always change your mind later. It'll be harder to go get a degree in something like Spanish and international studies and then not really have good job prospects, not have good income when you're young, not being able to put down a good contribution towards your 401k or an IRA or anything like that. Um, do the hard thing now, start making money now, and then you can always change later, which is what I did. So, no, I did not always know I wanted to be an engineer. I did do it just because I was following in my dad's footsteps and I trusted him. I didn't know what else to do, I guess. And he seemed to be having success in his life path. So I just kind of piggybacked on it until I went to school for psychology. That was something he would have never done.
Do you feel happy that that influence was there
Mhm.
to sort of move the needle for you? Was it aligned, or did it help you get more aligned?
I'm very grateful for it. I was pretty unhealthy 9 back then, or very, I
Mhm.
wouldn't say unhealthy. I didn't know myself whatsoever.
Young,
Standard. I was young. Exactly. I was
young,
young. I was
yeah,
figuring it out.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Give myself some credit. I was just young, just
absolutely.
a little baby. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know who I was. And so I was grateful to have somebody show me a way, because at the end of the day, it was probably very unlikely that I would have chosen my own path at that point.
Mm,
Any path I would have chosen would have been following somebody else's advice, following somebody else's first steps. So the fact that I followed his, um, I think was, I'm very thankful for the life I've had, for the career I've had, for what the opportunities that it's brought me, that it got me to a place that I was able to financially afford going back and getting a master's in my 30s for something completely different and doing that abroad. Uh, if I hadn't listened to him at the time, despite not wanting to actually work in that field long term, if I hadn't listened to him, then I wouldn't be where I am today.
as you think about him and honoring him in many different ways, right? When we lose somebody, there's not one thing that honors that person. But if this podcast is a piece of that, process of honoring him, what would you like to say to him, about him? Is there anything that comes up when I ask that question?
Um, like everything and nothing all at the same time.
Mm,
It's just he was such a complex guy and so nuanced, but yet also so himself that it's hard to summarize his contribution concisely. Even if I were to just talk about him for the entire hour of this podcast, I still would hardly scratch the surface.
actually, a really big compliment for a 5, so
Yeah. So at his celebration of life, I was pretty insistent that it was not a traditional funeral, that it was not a um he deserved something special and he deserved something big.
Mm,
So it was a 4-hour thing. And the first hour, which ended up being an hour and a half, was people talking about him from different phases of his life. And then the second portion, what you called the Jeff party, which was all of his hobbies were laid out at the venue. And we played playlist of his favorite music. And there was the reading table, there was the writing table, there were puzzle tables, there were games. I made everybody do a overly complex mixer activity because he also would do that at work and like Christmas parties and
mhm.
stuff with rules that were like this is too much, but it was Jeff style. We had like whiskey tasting because he liked his whiskeys. And we also had an introvert table that if anybody sitting at the introvert table was sitting there, you weren't allowed to talk to them because he also loved just sitting in silence by himself on his phone.
I love it. That's amazing.
So it was a really good time, but the first portion went long because he had people talking about him from a family perspective, childhood perspective. His roommate from college was talking about the Jeff he knew and his boss, people who he had mentored. He was a second dad to so many of our friends, and two of them talked about his impact on their lives. It was just really, really cool to see how all of these people saw him from such different lights and being able to paint that whole picture for everybody there to show, you do a version of Jeff and he was great in that version, but there was also so much more to him. It was really touching. And again, a great accomplishment for a 5. I will give a lot of credit for um my mom, the 7. He was the worker and he was not necessarily the social butterfly, but when he made good friends, he dug in close. But a lot of people there were there because my mom was the one to introduce him into his life, or my sister and my friends and friends of friends, and then kids of our friends now. It was like wall to wall, flooded with people that he might not have initially brought in, but he made feel so welcome and
Mm,
cared for and seen and valued when he did spend time with them.
sounds like a very unique and special remembrance of him, and I love all the tables. I would have wanted to go to every single one.
Yeah.
I love that you could do that and construct that and felt free to honor him in that way, right? That you don't have to do traditional things. I mean, you have rainbow hair, which I love. It's beautiful.
What? Thank you.
Um, so just the freedom to decide what our grief needs and what would be honoring to somebody and what it's just so personal and individual and specific. So I'm really
Yep.
happy that you guys got to have that very specific and individual experience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want to pick a 5 brains about anything before
Oh,
we go?
do you have any other things that you want to talk about from a grief perspective for 5s? We talked a little bit about the things that would be helpful for me would overwhelm you. Um,
Mm,
if you were giving suggestions to people to support a 5 going through grief, they have a loved one who's a 5 or suspected 5 going through the grief process.
I would start with the same exact thing that you said, which is it's really going to be dependent on the person. It's going to be dependent on subtype, wing, you know what I mean? So my subtype has switched. I used to be a sexual 5. Now I'm self-pres sexual social. Social has always been less that instinct. And I'm old, so I've learned some things in being old and making mistakes in my life. And thankfully, through some of my bigger losses, what I have learned for me as a 5 is the exact opposite of what you would think, is that people are very, very necessary in order to get through the grief process. And at the exact same time, the thing that you suggested about coming, "Here's, like, a list," that would have
Uh-huh.
been, like, very overwhelming. So it's this weird, odd balance of, "Please do check in, but not too much. Please offer, but don't overwhelm." And then if a 5 reaches out to you, know that you are one of their people. I actually had, another 5 friend who I was on the phone with the other day, and I was crying about grief, but about grief that my children are no longer children and they're in the teenage years, and it just hit me. And she, texted back and was like, "The fact that you got a little teary, that means that I am one of your people and you are trusting me with the deep, deep, right?" And I was like, "Thank you for knowing that," and just, like, knowing that how much that took to even hit send on that voice text where I cried, like, so that if we reach out to you and say, "I need you," obviously, there's the if you can't, you can say no. You don't have to be there unconditionally for a 5. But if a 5 reaches out and says, "I'm not okay. I need you. I'm not well," if you answer the phone and a 5 is sobbing, try to be there if you can, because that is a very vulnerable, low place in which we don't let many people see or into. And I am very grateful that I had a support network that in my times of like snotty, you're sweating, it's snotting, it's disgusting, it's late at night. There were people that were there for me. So if you're 5, reach out to your people. I think it really is because 5s can be so isolated. There is within grief and loss that 5s have to take ownership of their own feelings and emotions, the same way you're talking about anger, of like, actually, somebody else needs to see this. I can't do it all alone. And it's kind of a back and forth where a 5 really needs to reach out because somebody might not know. And also, if you know a 5, reach out. And I think it is okay to say, "What do you need?" to a 5. I think we might have more of a actually more of a, like, script of, like, specifically say this and don't say this. Specifically, I would like this, but not this, and I would like it to last for this amount of time, and then can we please be done because I don't want any more attention on me, and then I'm done now,
Mhm.
right? So there I would think that would be more common in 5s.
So my next question is going to be more niche, but also something that I probably wish I would have had this conversation with my dad beforehand is watching him deteriorate specifically while he was on hospice. Obviously a rough experience, but we're wanting to make him as comfortable as possible. From the perspective of another 5, do you have any advice for others on how to be there for somebody who's a 5 at end of life that would be specific to them? And I know it's probably unique. For example, if my mom was on her deathbed, she's the most social person everywhere. She probably wouldn't want to talk about it. She would want visitor after visitor after visitor. Um, and there were times that I was in tune with when he was kind of seeming to hit his limits with people or conversations or being asked too many questions or being told what to do instead of ask, "Are you ready to take this pill?" instead of like, "Jeff, take this pill." So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I didn't, but then as you were talking, I kind of did because, what you're saying would make sense because I haven't gone through that. Autonomy, independence, 5s are very self-led humans, so asking questions to honor autonomy, independence, and that self-ledness even at end of life, letting there be choices instead of directives. I would think would be really key. Listening and honoring the body and energetic limits, I would think would be really key. And then when the energy is there, being present for that. It made me think of my grandfather who had to be a type 5, like, had to. Could not have been. I didn't know about the Enneagram, like, he died when I was 17, and we were very close. And I was not there at his end of life because I was 17, so my mom flew. He lived in North Carolina, we lived in Maryland. But just hearing a little bit, my mom, I think, is a maybe a 1. Didn't talk about it very much. But now, like, 20 years later, there's some things coming out. Um, that kind of stuff sounded like what he needed then, and that there were times where he wanted to just share and talk about things, even though he would kinda come in and out of not being well, obviously, because it's end of
Mhm.
life. And then he also actually we had a dinner for him, so he did not want a funeral, he cooked. He was a man of science. Um, he had a very interesting job that I cannot share about, but it was very, very interesting and very, like, top secret.
Your
Um,
grandpa and my dad
and
sound similar.
and he also loved trees. He was a huge outdoorsman, and he taught me all about being outside and camping and water and kayaking and everything, and we would go hiking, and he would just look up, and this is before all the science came out about the trees. He was a huge naturalist, and he would just look up and in his very quiet way just whisper like, "I know they're talking to each other." Like, I know, and so then he passed away, and then The Secret Life of Trees came out, so, like, oh, like, we have scientific proof that they were, that he was right, like, so just I think I don't know. I think the end of life is just tricky for every person, and it's so unique to each one. But I guess I think the biggest things would be listening, honoring as much as possible their choices and what they want to have happen, and celebrating them in the way that they want to be celebrated. Like, yeah, we had a dinner because he was a big cook and liked to cook. So he had the meal that he wanted, and he had my uncle cook it, and everybody eat it together. And that's what we did, and it was lovely. And I forgot about that until you were talking, so it's pretty
Oh,
cool that you
yeah.
helped me remember that.
Yeah. You bringing up the autonomy um, was spot on because my dad was on hospice for 3 weeks, hadn't eaten for a month when he passed. So the last like 5 days or so, he was essentially like more or less comatose. Like he was there, but he was so drugged out on painkillers and just
Mm,
malnutrition and everything. And he had been getting up to go to the bathroom at the start, and then they were just going to do like the bedside thing, and then they ended up going to diapers at one point. So I think it was like the day before he died, he like wakes up at and wakes my mom up who's sleeping next to him at like 2 o'clock in the morning. He hasn't said a word all day. Hasn't really been with it all day. And all of a sudden, he's starting to try to get out of bed. Mom's like, "What's going on? Like, are you in pain or whatever?" And it comes across that he needs to go to the bathroom. And my mom says, "Honey, it's okay. Like, we have,
mm,
you have the diaper on. You can just go." He said, "When did that happen?" And
mm,
he refused. He
mm,
absolutely refused to do that. He wanted to honor his dignity. He wanted the choice. So my mom, fortunately, her best friend was also there. They got him sat up on the side of the bed so that he could do his business on his own terms. And at the time, like, my mom was just like, "What in the world is happening? You have been like not here at all for 3 days. And then the one time you're here, it's because you have to do things your way. Despite it, the rest of us are trying to sleep. You're just kind of dead weight right now, but we love you, so we'll do it." So yeah, that autonomy thing I have seen in action.
I don't know why it exists within us, but it just does.
Maybe the most
It's
important thing to remember.
it's not logical, actually. Sometimes we're not logical about, like, our autonomy and independence, and
Yeah.
it's just a baked in thing, I think. A human thing, you know?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess to end on a note about him without you having to come up with or drum up something profound, do you have a memory of him that pops into mind that would be like a nice last thing to share, or a saying that he had?
So to close this out, I will just leave you with my dad's 11 life axioms that he
Yes,
left behind. So
I loved them. Loved them. That's
he
perfect.
he worked in the defense industry, and in that realm they have something called challenge coins, which some people are familiar with, a lot of people aren't. And projects will get them put together, or teams will get them made. They're just like, half dollar sized coins that get customized to represent whatever the thing was, and then everybody gets one. They'll also get some extras and hand them out to people that they work with as like a thank you. It's kind of like a little, almost like a trading card thing within that realm or in that industry. So we decided to get some challenge coins made for him because he had his collection. So now he has his own custom challenge coin.
That's so
Um,
cool.
to honor him, that we've been able to hand out to not only people that he worked with over the years, but also friends and family. And on the back, we got his 11 life axioms, all written in concentric circles. So I will read them. This is coming from a 5. First one is run your own life or someone else will. One of his favorites was hard times make hard people. Hard people make soft times. Soft times make soft people. And soft people make hard times. And that's a cycle that just keeps on going. Another one, be good at your job and be fun to work with. Also, make others' jobs easier. Don't sweat the small stuff, and it all is small stuff. This is really small text. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. The secret to happiness is low expectations. And there's a caveat on that one. It's not low expectations in yourself, it's low expectations of expecting the world to give you things. Probably my favorite is just 3 words: people are dumb. Everything has rewards and consequences. You can be everything to someone or something to everyone. And then his final axiom was either make more than you spend or spend less than you make. So those are Jeff's wise words shared with you and everyone else.
Well said, Jeff. Well said.
He was great. I am so honored to get to be his daughter and am thankful for instilling in me the love of science, the love of analysis, the love of nuance, and his support throughout the years, resulting in this podcast in a roundabout way. Despite me being terrified to do it, I hope to keep his legacy alive by fighting the good fight, fighting against misinformation and lack of information to help the world be a little bit of a better place.
And you are fantastic.
Thanks. Thank you again, Melissa Kircher, for talking through this with me.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
If I think I mentioned on Instagram, you are Enneagram Paths. Is there anything else you want to share with anybody listening on how to find you?
Or my website, which is the same thing, enneagrampaths.com. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.